She signed a simple greeting to the lonely woman at the royal ball, just trying to be kind. The entire room froze in shock. What she didn't know, she'd just spoken a forbidden language to the vampire king's mother. And now, he would never let her leave. Elena Martinez had exactly 3 rules for surviving her shifts at the Crimson Court. Keep your head down, don't make eye contact with the guests, and never, ever speak unless spoken to. Tonight, she was about to break all 3. The ballroom glittered like the inside of a jewel box. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured rainbows across marble floors, so polished Elena could see her nervous reflection in them. She adjusted her simple black serving uniform and tried not to trip over her own feet as she navigated between clusters of guests who seemed to glide rather than walk. More champagne for table 7, her supervisor, Marcus, hissed in her ear. And for God's sake, stop shaking. They can smell fear. Elena nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure he was joking. The Crimson Court wasn't like the diner back in her hometown of Asheville, North Carolina. Here in the heart of New Orleans, the clientele wore clothes that cost more than her annual rent, spoke in accents she couldn't place, and had a way of looking at her that made her feel like a mouse in a room full of cats. Supernatural creatures, the rumors said. Vampires, specifically. Elena didn't believe in such things, or at least she tried not to. But there was something about the way none of them ever seemed to eat, the way their skin looked too perfect in the candlelight, the way the temperature dropped whenever one of them passed by. She loaded her tray with fresh glasses and headed toward table 7, weaving through the crowd. The orchestra played something classical and haunting. Couples danced with impossible grace, their movements synchronized in ways that seemed almost rehearsed. That's when she saw her. An elderly woman sat alone in an alcove near the eastern wall, surrounded by 4 guards in crimson uniforms. She wore a gown of deep purple velvet, and her silver hair was swept up in an elegant twist. But what caught Elena's attention wasn't her regal bearing, it was her face. The woman's eyes darted around the room with an expression Elena recognized instantly: isolation in a crowded space. Elena had seen that look in her grandmother's eyes, back before she died 3 years ago. Back when Grandma Rosa could no longer hear the world around her. The woman's hands moved suddenly, fingers forming shapes in the air. Sign language. She was signing to one of her guards, who stared at her blankly before giving a stiff bow and walking away without responding. Elena's heart clenched. The guard hadn't understood. And judging by the woman's slumped shoulders, this wasn't the first time. Don't get involved, Elena told herself. Just deliver the champagne and move on. But her feet had other ideas. Before she knew what she was doing, Elena was walking toward the alcove, her pulse hammering in her throat. The guards tensed as she approached, hands moving to weapons she couldn't see, but could definitely sense. I'm so sorry to disturb you, Elena stammered, looking at the woman. I just wanted to say hello. The woman's eyes lifted to hers, polite but distant. Clearly, she'd endured plenty of servers offering empty pleasantries. Elena swallowed hard. Then, setting down her tray, she raised her hands and signed, "May the night bring you peace, your grace. You honor us with your presence." The effect was instantaneous and electric. The woman's eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her mouth. For a moment, she simply stared at Elena as if she'd materialized out of thin air. Then, slowly, tears began to slide down her porcelain cheeks. The guards went rigid. One of them grabbed Elena's arm, but the woman raised her hand sharply, stopping him. With trembling fingers, the woman signed back. You speak the silent tongue.
Elena blinked.
Silent tongue? She'd learned basic ASL from her grandmother's old journal, the one filled with sketches and notes about sign language. But the gestures she'd just used had been tucked in the margins, labeled formal greetings. She'd practiced them out of curiosity, never thinking she'd actually use them. I learned from my grandmother's journal. Elena signed, her own hands shaking now. I hope I didn't offend. Offend? The woman's face broke into a smile that transformed her entirely. Child, you have given me my voice back. The ballroom had gone quiet. Elena suddenly realized that the music had stopped. Every single guest was staring at them. Hundreds of unnaturally beautiful faces turned in their direction, expressions ranging from shock to suspicion to something that looked almost like fear. "What's happening?" Elena whispered to the guard, still gripping her arm. "What did I do wrong?" But the guard wasn't looking at her. He was looking past her, toward the raised dais at the far end of the ballroom. A man stood there, and even from 50 feet away, Elena could feel the weight of his attention like a physical force. He was tall, dressed in a black suit that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His face was sharp and handsome in a way that didn't feel quite human. Too perfect, too symmetrical. His eyes, even at this distance, glowed with an amber light that made Elena's instinct scream danger. "That's King Lucien Voss," the guard murmured, and there was genuine fear in his voice. "And you just spoke to his mother in a language that's been dead for 300 years. Elena's stomach dropped. "King? Mother? Dead language." The man, Lucien, descended from the dais in 3 fluid strides that covered an impossible distance. The crowd parted before him like water. Within seconds, he stood directly in front of Elena, and up close, he was even more terrifying. Power radiated from him in waves. His amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to run and hide and never come out. "Explain yourself," he said, his voice soft and deadly. "How does a human servant know the silent oath?" I don't know what that is," Elena managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to be polite. My grandmother taught me." "Your grandmother," he said it like an accusation. "What was her name?"
Rosa Chen.
"She was a linguist before she." Lucien's eyes flared brighter. He turned to one of his attendants. "Bring me the records." Now then, to the room at large. "Everyone out. This gathering is concluded." There was no argument, no protest. Within minutes, the ballroom had emptied, leaving only Elena. The woman she now knew was Queen Celine, Lucien, and a handful of guards. Elena's mind raced. She'd only wanted to help, to offer a moment of kindness to someone who looked lonely. How had that turned into? Whatever this was. Queen Celine reached out and took Elena's hand, squeezing it gently. When Elena looked at her, the older woman signed, "Do not be afraid, child. You have done nothing wrong. You have, in fact, done something miraculous." But as Lucien circled her like a predator studying prey, his expression unreadable and dangerous, Elena wasn't so sure. She had a terrible feeling that her simple act of kindness had just pulled her into something far bigger and far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The silence in the empty ballroom felt suffocating. Elena's heart hammered so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Queen Celine still held her hand, but the gentle touch did little to calm the panic rising in her chest. Lucien Voss stood with his back to them, staring at a massive portrait on the wall, a stern-looking man in ancient armor. When he finally turned around, his amber eyes had dimmed to a dark gold, but they were no less intense. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the ornate chairs near the queen. Elena's legs obeyed before her brain caught up. She sank into the velvet cushion, acutely aware that she was getting her cheap uniform dirty on furniture worth more than her car. An attendant rushed in carrying a leather-bound book so old the cover was cracking. Lucien flipped through pages with movements too fast to follow, then stopped abruptly. His jaw tightened. "Rosa Chen," he read aloud. "Court linguist. Hired in 1987 to transcribe historical documents. Terminated in 1989 under," he paused, "mysterious circumstances.
No severance. No references.
Disappeared from all records." Elena's breath caught.
What?
"No, that's impossible. My grandmother worked at a university. She taught." "She lied to protect you," Lucien interrupted, snapping the book shut. "The question is, what else did she take when she left?" "Take." Elena's voice rose with indignation despite her fear. "My grandmother wasn't a thief. She was kind and gentle, and And she stole the most guarded secret of this court. Lucien leaned forward, his presence overwhelming. The silent oath isn't just sign language, Miss Martinez. It's a coded communication system used exclusively by vampire royalty for over 3 centuries. Every gesture has layers of meaning, security protocols, tactical commands. It was designed so that even if our enemies learned to speak our tongue, they could never intercept our most crucial communications. He moved closer, and Elena instinctively pressed back in her chair. No human has spoken it in over 200 years, he continued. The last mortal who knew it was executed for espionage in 1823. And yet here you are, a waitress from North Carolina, casually greeting my mother with perfect formal syntax. Queen Celine's hands moved sharply, drawing Lucien's attention. Elena watched as mother and son engaged in a rapid exchange of signs, their faces intense. The queen's gestures were forceful, almost angry. Lucien's responses were measured but firm. Finally, the queen turned to Elena and signed slowly, making sure she understood. My son believes you may be a spy. I have told him he's being ridiculous. You have the kindest eyes I've seen in a century. Despite everything, Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Your Majesty. I promise I'm not. I would never. Promises mean nothing, Lucien cut in. He'd understood his mother's signs, of course. For all I know, you've been planted here by the Dark Clan or the Silver Council. They've been looking for ways to infiltrate my inner circle for decades. I don't even know what those are.
Elena protested.
I just moved here 3 months ago because I needed work and my friend Jenna said the Crimson Court paid well. I didn't even know vampires were real until about 10 minutes ago, and honestly, I'm still not entirely convinced I'm not having a mental breakdown. Her voice had risen to near shouting. The guards tensed, but Queen Celine actually smiled. I like her, she signed to her son. She is fire. Lucien ignored this. Where is your grandmother's journal now? In my apartment. In a box under my bed with her other things.
Why?
Because that journal may contain classified information that could endanger every vampire in North America. He turned to one of the guards. Send a team to retrieve it. Apartment address? Elena rattled off her address mechanically, her mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. She'd just wanted to make rent this month. Now she was apparently caught up in some centuries-old vampire conspiracy. What happens to me? She asked quietly. Lucien studied her for a long moment. You present a significant security risk. The standard protocol would be to erase your memory of this evening and place you under surveillance. Elena's blood ran cold. Erase my memory? How? However, Lucien continued, and his mother's hand squeezed Elena's again. My mother has made a compelling argument. She believes you're innocent, and she has invoked her right as queen to claim you as a personal attendant. What does that mean? It means, Queen Celine signed, her expression gentle, that you will stay here, in the castle, as my companion. You will help me communicate with the court, and in return, you will be protected. Protected from what? Elena asked. Lucien's smile was cold. From me, primarily, and from the dozens of council members who would prefer to see you dead rather than risk their secrets being exposed. My mother's protection is absolute. As long as you remain under this roof and within her sight, you're untouchable. Elena's mouth went dry. And if I say no, then I will have no choice but to assume you're a threat. The amber glow returned to his eyes. And I eliminate threats, Miss Martinez.
Permanently.
It wasn't really a choice at all. Elena looked at Queen Celine, who gazed back with such hope and warmth that it made Elena's chest ache. The queen had been alone, unable to truly communicate with anyone for who knew how long. And somehow, through bizarre coincidence or fate, Elena had the ability to change that.
Okay, Elena whispered.
I'll stay. Queen Celine's face lit up with joy. She pulled Elena into an embrace that smelled of lavender and old roses. Over the queen's shoulder, Elena met Lucien's gaze. His expression was unreadable, but she caught something there, a flicker of relief, maybe, or perhaps just cold calculation. "Welcome to the Crimson Court, Miss Martinez," he said softly. "Pray you survive it." As guards escorted her to quarters she hadn't asked for, in a castle she couldn't leave, Elena realized she'd just traded her freedom for her life. She only hoped it would be enough. Elena's new quarters were absurdly luxurious and utterly terrifying. The room was 3 times the size of her entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows draped in heavy burgundy velvet, a 4-poster bed that could sleep 5 people, and a bathroom with a clawfoot tub that looked like it belonged in a museum. Oil paintings of stern-faced nobles lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her movement. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage. A servant, human, thankfully, which made Elena feel slightly less insane, had brought her a few changes of clothes and informed her that her belongings would arrive within the hour. Elena sat on the edge of the massive bed, still wearing her waitress uniform, trying to process the fact that her entire life had just been upended because she'd tried to be polite. A knock at the door made her jump. "Come in," she called, her voice shakier than she'd like. 2 guards entered carrying a familiar cardboard box. Elena's heart leaped, her grandmother's things. "King's orders," one of them said gruffly, setting the box on an ornate desk. "He'll want to examine these personally. You're not to leave this room until summoned." They left before Elena could respond, locking the door with an audible click. She rushed to the box, relieved to find everything intact. Her grandmother's reading glasses, still in their faded case. A silk scarf that smelled faintly of jasmine. 3 leather-bound journals filled with Rosa Chen's meticulous handwriting, linguistic notes, sketches of hand shapes, cultural observations from her travels. Elena had inherited her grandmother's love of languages, but none of her courage. Where Rosa had been bold and adventurous, Elena had always been the shy one, more comfortable with books than people. She opened the journal she'd learned the signs from, running her fingers over the familiar pages. The formal greetings were there in the margins, exactly as she remembered. But as she flipped through, looking for anything that might explain why these particular gestures were so dangerous, something caught her eye. The inside back cover had separated slightly from the binding. Elena's pulse quickened. She gently pulled at the leather, and the cover came away, revealing a hidden compartment she'd never noticed before. Inside was a single piece of aged parchment, folded carefully. With trembling hands, she unfolded it. An insignia stared back at her, an elaborate crest featuring a crimson rose intertwined with silver thorns, surrounded by symbols she didn't recognize. The artwork was exquisite, clearly done by a master craftsman. But it was the notation beneath that made Elena's breath catch. The Silent Oath, Article 7. Sworn this day between the House of Voss and the line of words. May understanding bridge the divide between night and day. Below that were signatures, one in elegant script that read Lucien Vossi, First King, and another in simpler handwriting. Rosa Chen, Chief Linguist and Keeper of the Oath. Elena's mind reeled. This was dated 1723. But that was impossible. Her grandmother had been born in 1945. Unless. She looked at the signature again, really looked at it. The handwriting was different from her grandmother's, but there was something familiar about the flourish on the R. She'd seen that same flourish in the earliest journal, the one her grandmother claimed was written by her own grandmother. How many generations back did this go? Elena turned the parchment over. On the back, in what looked like her grandmother's actual handwriting, were 3 words in Spanish. Lo siento, mi amor. I'm sorry, my love. A sudden noise in the hallway made Elena jump. She quickly refolded the parchment and tucked it into her pocket, then replaced the journal in the box. Her heart hammered as footsteps approached her door. But they passed by without stopping. Elena exhaled shakily and moved to the window. Through the glass, she could see the sprawling grounds of the estate, manicured gardens, stone pathways, and in the distance, the lights of New Orleans twinkling like fallen stars. Somewhere out there was her apartment, her normal life, her friend Jenna, who was probably wondering why Elena hadn't come home. She pulled out her phone. No signal. Of course not. Behind her, something scraped against wood.
Elena spuna rond.
A section of the wall was sliding open, a hidden door she hadn't noticed. Her first instinct was to scream, but the figure that emerged made her freeze. It was Lucien. He stepped into her room with the casual confidence of someone who owned every space he entered, which, technically, he did. His eyes went immediately to the box on the desk. "I came for the journals," he said without preamble. "My scholars need to examine them." "Of course," Elena managed, though her hand instinctively went to her pocket where the parchment was hidden. "They're right there." Lucien moved to the desk, his movements fluid and predatory. He picked up the first journal, flipping through it with that same supernatural speed. His expression remained neutral, but Elena noticed his grip tighten when he reached the pages with the silent oath gestures. "Your grandmother was thorough," he observed. "These notes are incredibly detailed. Almost too detailed for someone who supposedly only worked here for 2 years. Maybe she was just good at her job," Elena offered. Lucien's eyes snapped to hers. Or maybe she was gathering intelligence for someone. She wasn't a spy, Elena insisted, surprised by her own boldness. She was a linguist who loved learning. That's all. "People are rarely just one thing, Miss Martinez." He closed the journal and studied her face. "I've been king for over 200 years. Do you know what I've learned in that time?" Elena shook her head. "Everyone has secrets. Everyone has motives beyond what they show the world." He moved closer, and Elena fought the urge to step back. "The question is, what are yours?" "I don't have any secrets," she lied, acutely aware of the parchment burning like a coal in her pocket. "I'm exactly what I appear to be, a waitress who got caught up in something she doesn't understand." Lucien studied her for a long moment, and Elena had the unsettling feeling he could see right through her. Finally, he collected all 3 journals. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, you begin your duties with my mother. And Miss Martinez." He paused at the hidden door. "That insignia behind my throne in the Great Hall, you might want to take a look at it. I think you'll find it educational." He disappeared through the passage before Elena could respond. She waited until she was certain he was gone, then pulled out the parchment again, staring at the crest. An insignia behind his throne. The same one her grandmother, or her grandmother's grandmother, had hidden away. Whatever the silent oath was, whatever connection her family had to this place, it went deeper than anyone knew. And Elena had a terrible feeling that uncovering the truth might be the most dangerous thing she'd ever done.
Elena barely slept.
Every creak of the old castle, every whisper of wind against the windows made her jump. When dawn finally broke, though no sunlight penetrated the heavy curtains, a servant arrived with breakfast and instructions to report to Queen Celine's chambers at 8 o'clock sharp. The servant, a middle-aged woman named Margaret, was refreshingly normal. "Don't look so terrified, honey," she said kindly as she set down a tray of fruit and pastries. "The Queen's a sweetheart. It's the rest of them you need to worry about." "That's comforting," Elena muttered. Margaret smiled. "You'll do fine. Just remember, most of the staff here are human, just like us. We look out for each other. You need anything, you ask for me." The kindness nearly brought Elena to tears. "Thank you." At precisely 8 o'clock, 2 guards escorted Elena through a labyrinth of corridors. She tried to memorize the route but quickly gave up. The castle was enormous, with wings that seemed to branch off in impossible directions. They passed servants polishing silver, nobles having quiet conversations that stopped the moment Elena appeared, and rooms filled with artwork that belonged in galleries. Finally, they stopped before an ornate door carved with roses. "The Queen is expecting you," one guard said, knocking twice before opening the door. Queen Celine's chambers were warm and inviting, filled with plants and books and afternoon light that filtered through sheer curtains. The Queen herself sat by a window in a cream-colored dress, embroidering something with delicate precision. When she saw Elena, her face transformed with genuine joy. "Good morning, my dear," she signed, setting aside her needlework. "Please sit with me. Would you like tea?" Elena nodded, settling into the chair across from her. A servant poured tea into china so delicate Elena feared breathing on it too hard. You look tired, Celine observed. The first night is always difficult. This place can feel like a beautiful prison. Is that what it is for you? Elena signed back, then immediately regretted her boldness. I'm sorry, that was inappropriate. Celine waved her hand dismissively. Honesty is a rare gift here. Yes, it has been a prison of sorts. My hearing faded over many years, and with it, my ability to participate in my son's world. Vampires are verbal creatures. They rely heavily on tone, inflection, the subtle power in a voice.
Without those tools, I became
invisible. Elena's heart ached. How long has it been since someone really talked to you? Decades. Celine's smile was sad. My attendants are kind, but they don't know the silent oath. They pantomime, write notes, but it's not the same as true conversation. Do you understand?
Elena nodded.
She remembered her grandmother's frustration in those final years, the isolation that came with being unable to communicate freely. I understand. That's why you're a miracle to me, Celine continued. Not just because you can sign, but because you chose to. You saw someone alone in a crowded room, and you reached out. That kind of compassion is rare anywhere, but especially here. They talked for hours. Celine asked about Elena's life, growing up in Asheville, her love of languages, her grandmother's stories. In return, Elena learned about Celine's past, carefully avoiding anything that might reveal the hidden parchment. Around noon, Lucien appeared. He knocked once and entered without waiting for permission, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere in the room. Mother, he said, then signed simultaneously. How is your new companion working out? Wonderfully, Celine signed, beaming. She's sharp, kind, and we've had more meaningful conversation this morning than I've had in 50 years. Lucien's eyes flickered to Elena. I need to borrow Miss Martinez. Council business. Elena's stomach dropped, but Celine frowned. Can it wait? We were just... No, his tone was gentle but firm. It concerns her directly. Elena followed him into the corridor, her pulse racing. They walked in silence until they reached a large study lined with books that smelled of leather and age. Behind the massive desk hung the portrait she'd seen last night, and there, just visible in the painting's corner, was the crest. The same crest from the hidden parchment. You see it, Lucien observed, watching her face. Elena couldn't lie. Yes, that insignia represents the original covenant between vampires and humans. It was established by my ancestor, the first Lucien Voss, and a human linguist who helped create the silent oath he moved to stand before the portrait. The linguist's name was recorded as Chunwei, but historical records suggest she later adopted the name Rosa to blend into American society.
Elena's head spun.
You're saying my family has been involved with yours for 300 years. That's exactly what I'm saying. He turned to face her. The question is, why did your grandmother run? What was she afraid of? I don't know, Elena said honestly. She never talked about working here. I didn't even know until last night. Then we have a problem. Lucien opened a drawer and pulled out a worn file. Because according to these records, Rosa Chun, your grandmother, witnessed something the night she disappeared. Something that made her steal classified documents and vanish without a trace. He slid a photograph across the desk. It showed a younger Rosa standing beside a vampire Elena didn't recognize, a man with dark hair and a cruel smile. That's Varen Dark, Lucien said quietly. My cousin and greatest rival. 3 days after this photo was taken, Rosa disappeared. 2 days after that, half the Silent Oath codebook went missing. And a week later, Varen tried to assassinate me at the summer council. Elena stared at the photograph, her mind racing. You think my grandmother was working with him? I think she knew something that threatened his plans. And I think whatever she knew, she hid it in those journals. His amber eyes bore into hers. Did you find anything unusual when you looked through them? This was her moment. Elena could tell him about the parchment, about the hidden compartment. But something held her back. Maybe it was the intensity in his gaze, or the way his question felt more like an interrogation than a request for help.
No, she lied.
Just linguistic notes and personal memories. Lucien studied her for a long moment, and Elena forced herself to hold his gaze. If that changes, he said finally, you'll tell me immediately. For your own protection. Of course. As she left his study, Elena's hands trembled. She'd just lied to a vampire king who could probably kill her with a thought. But until she understood what the parchment meant, what her grandmother had been trying to protect, she couldn't risk giving it up. Back in Celine's chambers, the queen took one look at Elena's face and signed. He interrogated you. He's trying to protect his kingdom, Elena signed back. He's trying to protect himself, Celine corrected gently. There's a difference. Be careful, dear one. My son is a good man, but he's been king for a very long time. Sometimes he forgets that loyalty and trust aren't the same thing. Elena nodded, thinking of the parchment hidden in her room. She was beginning to understand exactly what the queen meant. 3 days passed in a strange, new routine. Elena spent her mornings with Queen Celine, helping her communicate with servants, reading to her, and sharing meals that felt more like time with a grandmother than service to royalty. The queen was teaching her the deeper layers of the silent oath, the tactical signals, the nuanced expressions that could convey entire paragraphs in a single gesture. But the castle itself remained hostile territory. Elena felt the stares everywhere she went. Whispers followed her through corridors. Servants regarded her with curiosity, but the vampire nobility looked at her with undisguised suspicion. More than once, she caught groups of well-dressed vampires watching her with expressions that made her skin crawl. On the 4th morning, everything came to a head. Elena was helping Celine arrange flowers in the solarium when a vampire she didn't recognize appeared at the door. He was tall and elegant, with platinum blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. Queen Celine, he said with a bow that somehow conveyed contempt. The High Council requests your presence. And that of your pet human. Celine's hands moved sharply. How dare you? The king has already agreed. The vampire interrupted smoothly. The council convenes in 10 minutes. I suggest you don't keep them waiting. He vanished before Celine could respond. The queen turned to Elena, her expression worried. I'm sorry, my dear. This is about you. I know, Elena signed, her stomach knotting with dread. The council chamber was exactly as intimidating as Elena had feared. It was a circular room with a domed ceiling painted with scenes of ancient battles. 12 chairs formed a ring around the center, each occupied by a vampire who radiated power and age. Lucien sat in the largest chair, his expression unreadable. Beside him was an empty seat, Celine's place. And in the very center of the circle, like a defendant in a trial, was a single wooden chair. For her. Miss Martinez, Lucien said formally. Please sit. Elena's legs felt like jelly as she walked to the chair. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. Celine took her seat beside Lucien, her hands already moving in signs Elena couldn't quite catch. A vampire with silver streaks in his dark hair leaned forward. Let's dispense with pleasantries. I am Counselor Blackwood, and I speak for many when I say that this human's presence in our court is a security risk we cannot afford. The queen has claimed her under royal protection, Lucien replied evenly. That claim is absolute. The queen is compromised by sentiment. A female vampire with red hair interjected coldly. She's lonely, so she latches onto the first human who shows her kindness. It's understandable but foolish. Celine's hands moved furiously, but Lucien spoke before she could finish. You will address my mother with respect, Counselor Drake. Then perhaps the king can explain, came a smooth, dangerous voice, how a human waitress from North Carolina learned a language that was supposed to be erased from mortal knowledge. Elena's blood went cold. She knew that voice from the photograph in Lucien's study. A vampire emerged from the shadows behind the chairs, tall, dark-haired, with a smile that promised cruelty.
Varandark.
He circled Elena's chair like a shark. It's a fascinating mystery, isn't it? Varen continued. The silent oath was purged from all mortal records in 1823. Every human who knew it was accounted for and dealt with. And yet, 3 centuries later, this young woman appears out of nowhere, speaking it fluently. How is that possible? Her grandmother was employed here as a linguist, Lucien said, but there was tension in his voice now. Ah, yes, Rosachan, who fled in the night, stealing classified materials. Varen's hand landed on Elena's shoulder, and she had to fight not to flinch. Tell me, Miss Martinez, what did your grandmother steal? What secrets did she pass down to you? I don't know what you're talking about, Elena said, proud that her voice didn't shake.
She taught me some signs.
That's all. That's all. Varen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You performed a formal royal greeting, one that includes security phrases and coded identifiers. That's not some signs, that's classified intelligence. Counselor Blackwood nodded. The Dark Clan has maintained that Rosa Chen was a spy, planted by the Silver Council to infiltrate our court. Her sudden appearance here, her granddaughter's convenient knowledge, it's too much coincidence. This is ridiculous, Celine signed sharply, and Lucien translated for the council. The girl is innocent. She acted out of kindness, nothing more. Or she's a sleeper agent, Varen suggested silkily. Trained by her grandmother to infiltrate the court when the time was right. And what better way than through the queen's loneliness? Elena's hands clenched in her lap. I'm not a spy. I didn't even believe vampires existed until 4 days ago. A convenient lie, Counselor Drake said. One that requires we simply take your word for it. What would you have me do? Lucien's voice cut through the arguing like a blade. Execute her on suspicion? Erase her memory and hope that's the end of it? She's under royal protection. That means something, or have we all forgotten our own laws? Laws can be amended when security demands it, Varen said. His hand tightened on Elena's shoulder, and she gasped at the pressure. He was far stronger than he appeared. I propose a full investigation. Let us examine her belongings, her correspondence, her bank records. Let us see what connections she has to our enemies. You've already examined her grandmother's journals, Lucien countered. Your scholars found nothing incriminating. Because we're looking in the wrong place, Varen released Elena and faced Lucien directly. I propose a blood test. If she's truly innocent, if she has no connection to our enemies, her blood will show it. A murmur rippled through the council. Elena looked at Celine, who had gone pale. That's barbaric, Lucien said quietly. That's thorough, Blackwood corrected. And given the circumstances, warranted. I second the motion. One by one, other counselors voiced their agreement. Elena watched in horror as the vote tilted against her. Even vampires who'd remained silent now nodded their approval. This is a mistake, Lucien said, but Elena heard the defeat in his voice. The council had spoken. Varen's smile widened. Don't worry, Miss Martinez. It's a simple procedure. We take a sample of your blood and examine it for abnormalities, chemical markers that might indicate enhancement or conditioning. If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear. But the way he said it, the gleam in his cold eyes, told Elena that innocence wouldn't matter. Whatever this blood test was, Varen already knew what result he wanted. And as guards moved to escort her from the chamber, Elena caught a fragment of conversation between 2 counselors. Doesn't know what she's carrying. Just like her grandmother. Better to eliminate the threat. Celine's hands flew, signing desperately to Lucien, but he shook his head. The law had been invoked. Not even the king could stop it now. As Elena was led away, she touched the pocket where she'd hidden the parchment, now sewn into the lining of her dress. Whatever her grandmother had discovered, whatever secret the Qin family had kept for 300 years, people were willing to kill for it. And Elena had a sinking feeling she was about to find out why. They locked Elena in her room, with 2 guards posted outside. The blood test was scheduled for the following evening, something about needing moonlight for accurate results, which sounded like complete nonsense to Elena but apparently was deadly serious to vampires. She had less than 24 hours to figure out what her grandmother had hidden and why it mattered so much. Elena pulled out the parchment again, studying it under the lamplight. The crest, the signatures, the cryptic message about understanding bridging the divide between night and day. What did it mean? She spread all 3 journals on the bed, searching for anything she might have missed. The first 2 were filled with linguistic observations, sketches of hand positions, notes about vampire culture and customs. Interesting, but not dangerous. The 3rd journal, the one with the hidden compartment, was different. Elena had always thought it was just more of the same, but now she looked closer at the margins. Her grandmother had used a technique Elena recognized from her own language studies, steganography. Hidden messages concealed within innocent-looking text. She'd done it by varying the pressure of her pen strokes, creating nearly invisible marks that could only be seen at certain angles. Elena tilted the pages toward the light, and her breath caught. There, in the margins of a passage about verb conjugation, were tiny marks forming words: treaty, broken, deliberate. She flipped through more pages, finding fragments scattered throughout. Dark faction planned it. Blamed on human insurgents. Lucy and I tried to stop them. Assassination made to look like human attack. Elena's heart pounded. She grabbed a notepad and began transcribing every hidden message she could find, arranging them in order. Slowly, horribly, a story emerged. In 1823, there had been a peace treaty between vampires and humans, the silent oath that the parchment referenced. It had been working for a century, with human linguists serving as liaisons between the mortal world and vampire courts. But a faction of vampires, led by the Dark family, opposed it. They believed vampires should rule humans, not cooperate with them. So they orchestrated an attack. They'd killed human diplomats and made it look like a vampire massacre, then blamed human insurgents for breaking the treaty. The Vampire Council, outraged, had voted to end all formal relations with humans. The linguists who knew the silent oath were executed as potential threats. But one vampire had known the truth, the first King Lucian. He'd tried to expose the conspiracy, but the Dark faction had assassinated him before he could present evidence to the full council. Elena's grandmother, or rather, her ancestor, had been the king's chief linguist. She'd witnessed the conspiracy, gathered proof, and fled before they could silence her too. The proof was the original treaty document, the parchment Elena had found. If the line of words meets the line of blood, Elena whispered, reading her grandmother's final note, the truth will restore what was broken. But the Dark family still searches for this evidence. They've built their power on the lie of human betrayal. If exposed, they lose everything. Underneath, in more recent handwriting, her actual grandmother's writing, was a note dated just months before her death. Elena, mi amor, if you're reading this, then you've found what I tried to keep hidden.
I'm sorry.
I tried to protect you from this burden, but the Chin family has carried this secret for too long. The parchment proves the Dark conspiracy. Show it to King Lucian Voss too. Only him. Trust no one else. The Darks have eyes everywhere. They killed my mother, and they've been searching for this document ever since. Be careful, my darling girl. The truth is a dangerous weapon. Elena sat back, her mind reeling. Varen Dark wasn't just Lucian's rival. He was the descendant of the vampires who'd murdered Lucian's ancestor and destroyed the human-vampire alliance. And if this parchment became public, it would destroy the Dark family's reputation and political power. No wonder they wanted her dead. A soft knock made Elena jump. She quickly hid the journals under her pillow. Who is it? Margaret, came the whispered reply. Let me in. Quickly. Elena opened the door a crack. The servant slipped inside, glancing nervously at the guards who'd momentarily stepped away. I don't have much time, Margaret said urgently. I heard the kitchen staff talking. The blood test tomorrow. It's a setup. Varen's having one of his people contaminate the sample. No matter what your blood shows, the results will say you're compromised. They're going to kill me, Elena whispered.
Worse.
They'll use the results to strip Queen Celine's protection, then erase your memory of everything, including whatever you know that scares them so badly. Margaret gripped Elena's hands. There's another option. Some of us loyal to the Queen, we can smuggle you out tonight. Get you to New Orleans proper. Maybe on a bus too.
No, Elena interrupted.
She thought of Celine's kind eyes, of the loneliness the Queen had endured. She thought of Lucien trying to protect her despite the council's pressure. And she thought of her grandmother, who'd spent her whole life hiding, always looking over her shoulder. The running stopped here. I need you to do something for me, Elena said. Can you get a message to King Lucien? Directly to him. No one else? Margaret nodded slowly. The Queen has private channels. What do you need to tell him? Elena grabbed a piece of paper and wrote quickly, I know why my grandmother ran. I know what Varen is looking for. We need to talk before the blood test. Come alone. Your ancestors' truth depends on it. She folded it and pressed it into Margaret's hand. Please. It has to be tonight. Margaret tucked the note into her apron. I'll try. But Elena, if he doesn't come, you need to run. Promise me. I promise. After Margaret left, Elena pulled out the parchment one final time. The crest of the rose and thorns seemed to shimmer in the lamplight. 300 years of secrets, lies, and murder. All because one family had chosen power over peace. Her grandmother had protected this truth with her life. Now it was Elena's turn to decide what to do with it. Outside her window, the moon rose over New Orleans, and somewhere in the castle, Elena knew Varen Dark was planning her destruction. She just had to survive long enough to stop him. Lucien came at midnight. He entered through the hidden passage in the wall, his expression grave. Your message was cryptic and dangerous. This better be worth the risk. Elena pulled out the parchment with trembling hands. This is what my grandmother protected. This is what Varen's been searching for. She watched his face as he unfolded it, saw his eyes widen as recognition hit. The original Silent Oath Treaty, he breathed. We thought it was destroyed in the fire of 1823. It wasn't a fire, Elena said quietly. It was murder. Your ancestor, the first King Lucien, was assassinated by the Dark faction to prevent him from exposing their conspiracy. She told him everything she discovered in the journals, watching as his expression shifted from shock to fury to something that looked like grief. 300 years, he said softly. 300 years of believing humans betrayed us first. That we were justified in ending the alliance. He looked at Elena with new eyes. Your family has protected this truth across centuries while mine built a kingdom on a lie. What do we do? Elena asked. Lucien carefully refolded the parchment. Tomorrow night, I'm hosting the Ball of Shadows, a political gathering meant to reaffirm the Council's unity. Every noble family will be there, including the Darks. We expose this then, publicly, where Varen can't simply make it disappear. He'll never let me live that long, Elena pointed out. The blood test is before the ball. Then we cancel the test. The Council ordered it. Can you override them? Lucien's jaw tightened. No. But my mother can invoke an ancient right, the Queen's delay. It postpones any action against someone under her protection for 48 hours, no exceptions. It's rarely used, but it's absolute law. Will she do it? For you? Lucien's expression softened slightly. Without hesitation. You've given her something she thought she'd lost forever. She'd burn the castle down before letting them hurt you. He moved toward the passage, then paused. Elena, thank you for trusting me with this. Your ancestor tried to save my ancestor, Elena said. Seems only fair we finish what they started. After he left, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe. One more day. She just had to survive one more day. The Ball of Shadows began at dusk. Elena had never seen anything like it. The ballroom had been transformed into something from a Gothic fairy tale. Black roses twined around marble columns, candles flickered in crystal chandeliers, and ice sculptures depicted scenes from vampire history. Nobles arrived in magnificent gowns and suits, each more elaborate than the last. Elena wore a dress Queen Selene had insisted on, deep emerald silk that made her feel like an imposter among royalty. The queen herself was resplendent in black velvet, diamonds glittering at her throat. "Stay close to me," Selene signed as they entered. "And remember, you're under my protection. No one can touch you." But Elena felt the hostility the moment they appeared. Conversation stopped. Eyes tracked their movement across the floor. She recognized council members from the trial, their expressions ranging from disapproval to barely concealed contempt. Lucien stood on the dais, greeting guests with practiced charm. When his eyes found Elena's, he gave the slightest nod. Everything was in place. The plan was simple. Halfway through the evening, Lucien would call for a toast and use that moment to reveal the parchment. With all the major families present, Varen couldn't suppress the truth. Simple, except Elena's instincts were screaming that something was wrong. She helped Selene greet guests, translating signs into words for nobles who'd never bothered to learn the silent oath. Most were polite but cold. A few were openly hostile. One elderly vampire actually spat at Elena's feet before Selene's withering glare sent him scurrying away. Then Varen appeared. He looked immaculate in a charcoal suit, his dark hair swept back, his smile perfect and poisonous. "Queen Selene," he said with a bow. "And the infamous Miss Martinez. How brave of you to attend tonight." Selene's hands moved sharply, but Varen just laughed. "I'm afraid I never learned that particular language." "Such a shame." His eyes locked on Elena. "Though, I hear you're quite fluent. Tell me, what other family secrets did your grandmother pass down?" "Enough, Varen." Lucien's voice cut in. He descended from the dais, positioning himself between Elena and his cousin. "You've made your suspicions clear. The council will address them in due time." "Of course, cousin." Varen's smile never wavered. "I simply wanted to welcome our guest. After all, this may be her last ball." The threat was barely veiled. Lucien's eyes flashed amber, but Varen had already melted back into the crowd. "He knows," Elena whispered. "Impossible," Lucien said, but doubt flickered across his face. "The parchment is locked in my private vault. Only Mother and I know what we're planning." Selene's hands moved urgently. "We should move up the timeline. Now, before." She stopped mid-sign, her eyes widening. Her hands trembled as they formed new words. "Danger. Betrayal near. Blood will spill tonight." "Mother, what?" Lucien began. Then the lights went out. Screams erupted across the ballroom. In the darkness, Elena heard the whistle of something cutting through air, felt Selene grab her arm and pull her down. When the emergency candles flared to life seconds later, chaos had erupted. Nobles scattered, guards rushed forward, and there, standing exactly where Lucien had been, was a cloaked figure with a silver blade raised high. Elena didn't think. She just moved. "Lucien," she screamed, throwing herself forward. She hit him at an angle, shoving him sideways. The blade meant for his heart slashed across her forearm instead, and pain exploded white-hot through her body. Elena hit the floor hard, blood pooling beneath her. Through blurring vision, she saw Lucien whirl on the assassin with inhuman speed, his restraint shattering. The temperature plummeted. The candles guttered, and Lucien's eyes blazed like twin suns as power rolled off him in waves. The assassin didn't even have time to scream before Lucien's hand closed around his throat, lifting him off the ground. "Who sent you?" Lucien's voice was barely recognizable, ancient and terrible. "Speak." But the assassin's eyes had already gone glassy, dead before he could answer. Lucien dropped the body and turned to Elena, his fury giving way to something like panic. "Get a healer. Now." Through the pain, Elena saw Selene kneeling beside her, tears streaming down the queen's face. She saw nobles frozen in shock, guards forming a protective circle, and somewhere in the crowd, Varen, watching with cold calculation, his smile finally gone. "She saved him," someone whispered. "The human saved the king." As darkness crept in at the edges of Elena's vision, she heard Lucien's voice, soft and fierce. Touch her again, and the night will burn. I swear it on my blood. Anyone who harms her answers to me. Then everything went black. Elena woke to the smell of herbs and candlelight. She was back in her room, but it had been transformed into something resembling a hospital ward. Medical equipment she didn't recognize lined the walls, and a vampire in white robes sat beside her bed, monitoring a strange device that hummed with soft blue light. Her arm throbbed beneath pristine bandages. "You're awake," the vampire said, relief evident in his voice.
I'm Dr. Castellan.
"You've been unconscious for 6 hours." The blade was silver, toxic to vampires but also poisonous to humans in high concentrations. "We've neutralized most of it, but you'll need rest." The king, Elena tried to sit up, and pain lanced through her. "Is fine. Thanks to you," the doctor gently pushed her back down. "He's been here the entire time. Hasn't left your side except to."
Well,
"You'll hear about that soon enough." Before Elena could ask what that meant, the door burst open. Queen Celine rushed in, her elegant composure shattered by worry. When she saw Elena awake, she let out a sob and immediately began signing. "Thank the ancients. I thought we'd lost you." "I'm okay." Elena signed back weakly. "What happened after?" Lucien happened. The queen's expression was complicated, pride mixed with concern. "He declared martial law, locked down the entire castle. Every guest is being held and interrogated. He's systematically tearing apart the Dark Factions network, and he won't stop until he finds who ordered the assassination." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Lucien appeared in the doorway. He looked different, dangerous. His perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his shirt partially unbuttoned, and his eyes still carried that amber glow from the ballroom. But when he saw Elena awake, something in him softened. "Leave us," he said quietly to the doctor and guards. Celine squeezed Elena's hand and signed, "I'll be right outside if you need me." Then she too departed, leaving them alone. Lucien pulled a chair to Elena's bedside and sat, his movements carefully controlled. For a long moment he just looked at her. "You're an idiot," he said finally.
Elena blinked.
"Excuse me?" "You threw yourself in front of a silver blade meant for a vampire king. A king who's survived 200 years of assassination attempts, who has supernatural speed and healing, who could have survived that blade." His voice was steady, but his hands clenched the armrests hard enough to crack the wood. "You're human. Fragile. That blade could have killed you." "But it didn't kill you either," Elena pointed out. "So, I'd say we both won." "This isn't a joke." The words exploded from him. Lucien stood abruptly, pacing like a caged predator. "Do you understand what nearly happened? I almost watched you die. For me. A human girl who's been here less than a week, throwing away her life for—" He stopped, his back to her, shoulders rigid. "For what?" Elena asked softly. "For a vampire? For a king? I didn't think about any of that. I just saw someone about to hurt a person. She caught herself. Someone who didn't deserve it." Lucien turned, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch.
"Why?"
"After everything, the interrogations, the council's hostility, being trapped here, why would you save me?" Elena thought about her grandmother's journal, about centuries of secrets and lies, about Queen Celine's loneliness and Lucien's burden of leadership, about how sometimes doing the right thing meant risking everything. "Because it was right," she said simply. "And because your mother would be devastated if anything happened to you. And because," she hesitated, then pushed forward, "because I think you're trying to do better than your ancestors did. Someone should protect that." Something shifted in Lucien's expression. He returned to the chair, sitting close enough that Elena could see gold flecks in his amber eyes. "The assassin was compelled," he said quietly. His mind was completely controlled, a forbidden technique that leaves no trace of who gave the orders. "But I know. We all know. Varen, he's disappeared. Fled the castle during the chaos, along with 3 council members loyal to his family. It's an admission of guilt, but not one I can prove in court. Lucien's jaw tightened. I've seized dark assets, ordered arrests of known conspirators, but Varen himself is in the wind. And without him, I can't. We can still expose the truth, Elena interrupted. The parchment, the treaty, everything my grandmother documented. It's not enough. Not without Varen to stand trial. He looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. I failed, Elena. 300 years, and I'm no closer to justice than my ancestor was. Then we changed tactics. Elena pushed herself up, ignoring the protest from her arm. Varen fled because he's afraid. He knows we have evidence, knows his conspiracy is unraveling. So we don't wait for him to come back. We force him out. How? Elena's mind raced, pieces falling into place. You said the Ball of Shadows was meant to reaffirm unity.
What if we use it for exactly that?
Announce a new alliance with humans, a restoration of the Silent Oath. Make it public, make it historic. Invite human representatives, media, everyone. Lucien frowned. That would be revolutionary, Elena finished. And it would destroy everything the Dark family built their power on. If vampires and humans reconcile, their entire political platform collapses. Varen would have to act, have to try to stop it. And when he does, we'll be ready for him. Lucien's eyes lit with understanding. We turn the prey into the hunter. Exactly. He studied her for a long moment. You're remarkably cunning for someone who was serving champagne a week ago. I had a good teacher. Elena thought of her grandmother. Always 3 steps ahead. Always planning. So?
Can you do it?
Can you propose a new alliance? The council will fight me on this. Many still believe humans betrayed us first. Then show them the parchment. Show them what really happened. Elena met his gaze steadily. You're the king, Lucien. Act like it. A slow smile crossed his face, the first genuine one she'd seen. My mother was right about you. You do have fire. I heard that. Celine signed from the doorway, where she'd apparently been eavesdropping. And I approve of this plan. It's time we stopped hiding from the truth. Lucien stood, some of that dangerous energy returning, but focused now, purposeful. Then we move forward. I'll call an emergency council session for tomorrow night. We present the evidence, propose the alliance, and set the trap. And if Varen doesn't take the bait? Elena asked. Lucien's smile turned predatory. Then I'll hunt him to the ends of the earth. No one tries to kill my people and walks away. The way he said my people, looking directly at Elena, made her heart skip. As he left to begin preparations, Celine sat beside Elena's bed, her expression thoughtful. My son hasn't cared about someone like this in a very long time, she signed. Be careful with his heart, dear one. It's more fragile than he'd ever admit. Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she simply nodded. Outside, dawn was breaking over New Orleans. And somewhere in the city, Varen Dark was planning his next move. The game had changed. Now it was personal. The emergency council session was held in the Great Hall rather than the usual chamber. Lucien wanted witnesses. Every noble family, every servant, every guard was summoned to attend. The massive room overflowed with hundreds of vampires, all whispering nervously about what could warrant such unprecedented assembly. Elena stood beside Queen Celine on the dais, her bandaged arm hidden beneath the sleeve of a formal gown the queen had insisted she wear. Despite the doctor's protests, she'd refused to miss this moment. Lucien entered last, and the room fell silent. He wore full ceremonial regalia, black robes trimmed in crimson, the ancient crown of his house, and an expression of cold authority that made even the oldest nobles shrink back. 3 nights ago, he began, his voice carrying through the hall without effort, an assassin attempted to murder me at the Ball of Shadows. This attack was not random. It was coordinated, planned, and executed by someone with intimate knowledge of our security protocols. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Council members shifted uncomfortably. The assassin died before revealing his master, Lucien continued. But he left behind something more valuable than a confession. He gestured, and guards wheeled in a table covered with documents. His personal effects, including encrypted communications with Counselor Varen Dark. Gasps echoed through the hall. One of the remaining Dark loyalists stood. Those could be forgeries. My cousin would never. Your cousin fled the castle immediately after the assassination attempt. Lucian cut in. An innocent man doesn't run. But let's examine the evidence regardless. Dr. Castellan stepped forward, holding up sheets of parchment. These letters contain information only accessible to High Council members, guard rotations, vault combinations, the King's schedule. They're written in Dark family cipher, verified by our cryptographers. Furthermore, Lucian said, his eyes scanning the crowd, we've identified 3 other council members who received payments from Dark accounts in the weeks leading up to the ball. Counselor Blackwood, Counselor Drake, and Counselor Reeves. You will surrender your seals and submit to investigation. The 3 named counselors went white. Blackwood tried to speak, but guards were already moving to detain them. This is an outrage, Drake protested. You can't simply accuse sitting council members without proper trial. I can when I have proof of conspiracy to commit regicide. Lucian's voice dropped to something deadly. You sold your loyalty for gold. You betrayed your king and your people. You will face justice. As the disgraced counselors were led away in chains, Elena felt Celine's hand find hers. The queen was trembling, whether from anger or vindication. Elena couldn't tell. But Lucian wasn't finished. These betrayals didn't begin 3 days ago, he said, and now his tone shifted to something almost sad. They began 300 years ago, with a lie that shaped our entire civilization. He nodded to Elena. This was her moment. With shaking hands, she pulled the parchment from her gown and walked forward. The room watched in confused silence as she unfolded it and held it up for all to see. This, Lucian announced, is the original Silent Oath Treaty, the covenant between vampires and humans that established peace in 1723. A treaty we were told was destroyed when humans betrayed us in 1823. The hall erupted in shocked conversation. Elena saw nobles leaning forward, straining to see the ancient document. But that's not what happened, Lucian continued, his voice cutting through the noise. Miss Martinez, please read the historical account from your grandmother's journals. The true account. Elena's mouth was dry, but she forced herself to speak clearly, reading from the pages she'd memorized. August 15th, 1823. I witnessed Varen Dark I and his faction murder human diplomats at the peace summit. They made it appear as though humans had attacked first, breaking the treaty. When King Lucian I discovered the truth and moved to expose them, they assassinated him and blamed human insurgents. The council, believing the lie, ended the alliance and ordered the execution of all human linguists who knew the Silent Oath. Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. This is preposterous. One of the Dark cousins shouted. A human's diary proves nothing. It's clearly fabricated. The parchment has been verified by our oldest archivists, Dr. Castellan interjected. The ink, the paper, the seal, all authentic to 1723. And the signatures match historical records. This document is real. Chun Wei, the linguist who signed this, was my ancestor, Elena added, her voice stronger now. My family has protected this truth for 3 centuries, passing it down generation to generation, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. My grandmother died, keeping this secret safe. She knew that exposing the Dark conspiracy would put her in danger, so she hid the evidence and disappeared. Queen Celine stepped forward then, her presence commanding attention. She began to sign, and Lucian translated, his voice thick with emotion. I was there, in 1823. I was young, newly married to the previous king, and I remember the confusion when the alliance collapsed. I remember my husband's anguish when his father was murdered. I remember asking why and being told humans were to blame. For 300 years, I've carried that belief. And for 300 years, it was a lie. She turned to face the assembled vampires, her signs sharp and furious. The Dark family built their power on deception and murder. They've poisoned our culture with hatred toward humans, convinced us we were victims when we were the aggressors. And when my son tried to investigate irregularities in their accounts, they tried to kill him too, just as they killed his ancestor. This proves Varen's guilt, Lucien said. The assassination attempt wasn't about politics or power. It was about keeping the secret buried. He knew that if the truth emerged, his entire family would be destroyed. The remaining Dark loyalists tried to flee, but guards blocked every exit. Here's what's going to happen, Lucien announced. Effective immediately, the Dark family is stripped of all titles, lands, and council seats. Their assets are frozen pending investigation into 3 centuries of conspiracy and fraud. And I am formally proposing a restoration of the Silent Oath, a new alliance between vampires and humans, built on truth instead of lies. The hall exploded in argument. Some nobles shouted approval, others protest. But Elena noticed something crucial. More were nodding than objecting. The evidence was too damning, too clear. The truth was finally winning. Lucien raised his hand for silence. I'm issuing a warrant for Varen Dark's arrest. 1 million gold sovereigns to whoever brings him to justice. He cannot hide forever. As the session dissolved into chaos, Elena felt a strange mixture of triumph and dread. They'd exposed the conspiracy, yes. But Varen was still out there, dangerous and desperate. And desperate enemies were the most dangerous kind. Celine signed to her. You did it, dear one. You freed us from centuries of lies. But as Elena caught Lucien's eye across the hall, she saw the same thought reflected there. This wasn't over. Not yet. The real battle was just beginning. 3 days after the council session, Elena sat in the castle library with Queen Celine, carefully transcribing the last of her grandmother's hidden notes. The room was quiet except for the scratch of pen on paper and the occasional crackle from the fireplace. They'd found more. So much more. Elena's hand cramped as she copied another marginal notation. The prophecy speaks of convergence. When the 2 lines meet, the choice will determine everything. Prophecy.
Elena murmură aloud.
She'd found several references to it now, scattered throughout the journals, but never a full explanation. Celine looked up from her embroidery. Did you find something? My grandmother kept mentioning a prophecy. Something about 2 lines meeting. Elena flipped through pages, frustration mounting. But she never wrote what it actually said. The queen's expression changed, becoming distant. There is an old prophecy. I heard it only once at my wedding, spoken by the court's oracle. But she died decades ago, and the words were forbidden from being written down. Do you remember it? Celine set aside her needlework, her hands moving slowly as she recalled. When the line of words meets the line of blood, when silence speaks and secrets wake, the kingdom will know peace or perish by the choice the joined ones make. Elena's blood went cold. The line of words and the line of blood. My family and Lucien's. Perhaps. But prophecies are tricky things. They're often clear only in hindsight. No, this makes sense. Elena stood, pacing. The Silent Oath was created by the first Lucien, the line of blood, and Chun Wei, the line of words. They built the alliance together. And when the Darks destroyed it, they literally broke that joining. My grandmother understood this. That's why she preserved the treaty, why she passed it down through generations. She was waiting for the lines to meet again. And they have. You and my son. Elena's cheeks flushed. It's not like that. Isn't it? Celine's smile was knowing. Prophecies aside, I've seen how he looks at you. How you look at him when you think no one's watching. The line of words and the line of blood have met, Elena. The question is, what choice will you make? Before Elena could respond, Lucien burst through the library doors, his expression urgent. We found him, Varen. He's in the old French Quarter warehouse district, and he's not alone. He's gathered at least 30 loyalists. Vampires who still believe in the old ways. He looked at Elena. We're moving tonight. I need you and Mother to stay here, behind maximum security. Absolutely not, Elena said immediately. If this is about the treaty, I need to be there. The prophecy. What prophecy? Lucien's eyes narrowed. Elena quickly explained what she'd found, what Celine had remembered. As she spoke, she watched understanding and then concern cross his face. Peace or perish, he repeated quietly. That's a hell of a choice. Which is exactly why we need to handle this carefully, Elena argued. If we just attack Varen's compound, it becomes a battle. More lies, more violence. The same cycle that's repeated for 300 years. But if we go to negotiate, if we offer him a chance to surrender and face trial, he'll kill you, Lucien said flatly. He's tried once already. Then protect me. But we have to try, Lucien. The prophecy says the choice determines everything. What if that choice is between vengeance and justice? Between perpetuating the cycle or breaking it? Celine stood, moving to her son's side. She's right. If you go in with an army, Varen becomes a martyr to those who still oppose the alliance. But if you go as a king seeking justice, offering mercy in exchange for truth, you're asking me to risk everything on a 300-year-old prophecy, Lucien said, but his resolve was wavering. I'm asking you to trust that some things are worth the risk, Elena replied. Your ancestor tried to expose the truth and was murdered for it. You have the chance to finish what he started, not with violence, but with the very thing the Darks destroyed, understanding between our peoples. Lucien was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. Finally, he sighed. If we do this, and that's a massive if, you follow my orders exactly. At the first sign of danger, you retreat. Agreed. Agreed. And you, he turned to his mother, stay here. I can't protect both of you. I wouldn't dream of coming, Celine signed, though her expression was worried. But Lucien, remember what the prophecy says. The choice isn't just about tactics. It's about what kind of kingdom you want to build. For hours later, Elena found herself in an armored vehicle heading into the French Quarter, surrounded by 20 of Lucien's most trusted guards. The warehouse district was dark and abandoned, the perfect place for fugitives to hide. Lucien sat across from her, his expression unreadable. He'd changed into tactical gear, looking every inch the warrior king. But Elena noticed his hand kept drifting to the sword at his hip, nervous energy from someone who rarely showed nerves. Second thoughts? She asked quietly. About 100 of them, he met her eyes. Elena, if this goes wrong, if Varen doesn't honor the parley, I need you to know something. Don't, she interrupted. Don't say goodbye like we're not coming back. I'm saying that you've changed things. In a week, you've done what I couldn't do in 2 centuries. You've given me hope that we can be better than our history, his expression softened. Whatever happens tonight, thank you for that. The vehicle stopped before Elena could respond. They'd arrived. The warehouse loomed ahead, its broken windows like dead eyes. Light flickered inside, torches or candles. Elena could see shadows moving, hear low voices. Remember, Lucien said as they exited the vehicle. Stay behind me. Trust me to handle this. They approached the entrance, guards flanking them. Lucien raised his hand, and his voice rang out.
Varan d'Arc.
I come under flag of parley. Show yourself, and let's end this with honor, not bloodshed. For a moment, nothing. Then the warehouse doors groaned open. Varen stood in the entrance, flanked by his loyalists. He looked different, wilder, desperate. His eyes locked on Elena with pure hatred. Honor, he laughed bitterly. You speak of honor while parading that human liar around like some kind of savior? While destroying my family based on convenient documents. The documents are authentic and you know it, Lucien replied calmly. Your ancestor orchestrated a massacre and blamed humans. My ancestor tried to expose the truth and was murdered. Those are facts, Varen. The question is, what do we do now?
Now.
Varen's smile was cruel. Now I show you what happens when kings forget their place. He raised his hand, and 30 vampires appeared on the warehouse roof, weapons drawn. It was an ambush. And Elena realized with horrible clarity that the prophecy's moment had arrived. Peace or perish. The choice was now. Stand down. Lucien's voice cracked like thunder, but Varen's forces didn't move. 30 weapons remained trained on them, ready to strike at any moment. Elena's heart hammered, but she forced herself to step forward, moving beside Lucien rather than behind him. "This is exactly what your ancestor wanted," she called out, her voice surprisingly steady. 300 years ago, the Dark family started a war because they couldn't accept peace. And here you are, Varen, proving that nothing has changed. You'd rather die fighting than admit the truth. Truth. Varen spat. Your truth is a convenient lie, written by a human who wanted to save her own skin. Then let's prove it, Elena said. You claim the documents are fake?
Fine.
Let's have a trial. A real one, with witnesses, evidence, and proper procedure. If I'm lying, the truth will come out. The human speaks wisdom, a voice called from behind Varen. An older vampire emerged from the warehouse, ancient enough that his skin had taken on an almost translucent quality. Lord Varen, I've served your family for 2 centuries, but I won't die for a lie. If the evidence is fabricated, a trial will expose it. If it's real, he paused, then perhaps we've been on the wrong side of history. Murmurs of agreement rippled through Varen's forces. Elena saw doubt flickering across faces, weapons lowering slightly. You're all cowards, Varen snarled. She's bewitched you with. With what? Lucien interrupted, his tone razor-sharp. With evidence? With due process? You accuse me of tyranny, cousin, yet you're the one demanding blind loyalty, without proof. So here's my offer. Surrender now, stand trial, and if the council finds you innocent, you go free with a full pardon. And if they find me guilty, then you face justice. As any citizen would. Varen's laugh was hollow. You expect me to trust a trial conducted by your loyalists? By a council you've already purged? No, Elena said, an idea crystallizing. We hold the trial publicly. Invite human representatives. Make it transparent. If you're truly innocent, you have nothing to fear from the truth. The silence that followed was deafening. Varen's forces were watching him now, waiting for his response. Elena could see the calculation in his eyes. If he refused a fair trial, he admitted guilt. If he accepted, he gambled on his ability to discredit the evidence. A public trial, Varen said slowly. Witnessed by humans. Overseen by neutral arbiters from other vampire courts. Agreed, Lucien said without hesitation. And if I'm acquitted, my family's titles and properties are restored. If you're acquitted, justice will be served. Lucien's tone made it clear he didn't believe that would happen. Varen studied them both, then finally lowered his hand. His forces relaxed, weapons dropping. Then I accept. But know this, cousin. If this trial is a sham, if you've rigged it in any way, my followers will burn your castle to the ground. I'd expect nothing less, Lucien replied coolly. The trial of night was convened 1 week later in the Great Hall, which had been transformed into a courtroom. True to his word, Lucien had invited representatives from 5 neutral vampire courts, along with 3 human delegates, including a federal judge from New Orleans who'd been cleared to learn about vampire existence. The hall overflowed with observers. News of the trial had spread through supernatural communities worldwide. Some came out of curiosity, others out of concern that it might set precedent for how vampires dealt with internal justice. Elena sat in the front row beside Queen Celine, her stomach churning with nerves. Everything hinged on the next few hours. Varen sat in the defendant's chair, looking composed but tense. His attorney, a vampire known for defending impossible cases, shuffled papers with practiced confidence. The chief arbiter, Lady Morgana from the European courts, called the proceedings to order. We are here to determine the truth of serious allegations, she announced. that Verendark conspired to assassinate King Lucien Voss II, and that his family orchestrated the destruction of the Silent Oath Alliance 3 centuries ago. The burden of proof lies with the prosecution. Dr. Castellan presented first forensic evidence from the assassination attempt, the encrypted letters, the financial records showing payments to corrupted council members. It was damning, but Varen's attorney argued it was circumstantial. My client's cipher could have been stolen, the lawyer argued. The payments could have been legitimate business transactions misinterpreted by hostile investigators. Where is the direct evidence of guilt? Then it was Elena's turn. She approached the stand with the parchment and journals, her hands trembling slightly. For the next hour, she walked the court through her grandmother's documentation, the hidden messages, the historical accounts, the testimony of an eyewitness to the original conspiracy. And how do we know your grandmother wasn't simply fabricating this? Varen's attorney challenged. She was, by her own admission, fleeing the court. She could have invented this story to justify her theft of classified documents. Elena had prepared for this, because her account is corroborated by other sources. Dr. Castellan? The doctor approached with a sealed container. These are archived reports from 1823, recently discovered in the old vault. They document inconsistencies in the official narrative. Vampire witnesses who reported seeing dark family members near the summit site before the attack, despite their claims of being elsewhere. Questions about how human insurgents could have penetrated vampire security so easily. All buried and never investigated. Buried by whom? Lady Morgana asked. By council members who, according to contemporary records, received significant dark patronage in the years following 1823, Dr. Castellan placed the documents before the arbiters. The cover-up wasn't perfect. The evidence was always there. We simply chose not to look. The defense crumbled over the next 2 hours. Witness after witness came forward. Vampires who'd harbored doubts for centuries, servants who'd overheard suspicious conversations, even one of Varen's own former allies who'd agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. Finally, Lady Morgana called for final statements. Varen stood, his composure finally cracking. My family has served this kingdom for 300 years. We've maintained order, preserved tradition, kept vampires strong. If we bent some rules, made hard choices, it was for the greater good. The alliance with humans was weakness. It still is. This trial is proof. You're allowing mortals to judge vampire affairs. I'm allowing truth to judge lies, Lucien replied quietly. The arbiters deliberated for only 30 minutes. When they returned, Lady Morgana's face was grave. On the charge of conspiracy to commit regicide, guilty. On the charge of historical conspiracy and fraud, guilty. On all counts, Verendark, you are found guilty. The hall erupted, some in triumph, others in anger. But Varen just laughed, a broken sound. You've won nothing, he said, staring at Elena. The line of words and the line of blood. You think you've broken the cycle? You've just begun it. There will always be those who remember what we were, who reject what you're trying to become. This trial doesn't end anything. It ends the lies, Elena interrupted, standing. It ends the cover-ups and the fear. It starts something new. That's enough. As guards led Varen away, Celine's hand found Elena's. The prophecy, she signed. Peace or perish. You chose peace. We all did. But at what cost? Elena whispered, watching the divided reactions in the crowd. Lucien approached, his expression unreadable. The cost is uncertainty. The risk of change. But you were right. Some things are worth the risk. Outside, dawn was breaking. A new day for the Crimson Court. And for the first time in 300 years, the future was unwritten. 6 weeks after the trial, the Crimson Court looked completely different. Elena stood at one of the newly opened courtyard gates, watching as the first group of human visitors arrived for the public ceremony. They came cautiously, journalists, historians, linguists, diplomats, people who'd been invited to witness something unprecedented. The restoration of the Silent Oath. Nervous? Margaret asked, adjusting Elena's formal gown. The servant had become a close friend in recent weeks, one of the few people who understood how strange Elena's life had become. Terrified, Elena admitted. What if this doesn't work? What if we're moving too fast? Then you'll figure it out. You always do, Margaret squeezed her hand. Now go. The Queen is waiting. Elena found Celine in her chambers, looking radiant in a gown of silver and white. The Queen had changed since the trial. She stood taller, smiled more freely, engaged with the world in ways she hadn't in decades. You look beautiful, Celine sighed. Are you ready for this? I still can't believe it's happening. Elena signed back. 6 weeks ago, I was just a waitress. And now you're the architect of peace. Celine's expression was warm. My grandmother used to tell me that history turns on small moments, a kind word, a brave choice, a connection made across impossible divides. You've given us all such a moment, Elena. We gave it to each other, Elena corrected. You, Lucien. All the vampires who chose to believe in something better. They descended together to the grand terrace, where hundreds had gathered. The space had been transformed with both vampire and human aesthetics, crystal chandeliers alongside modern lighting, ancient banners beside contemporary art. A symbol of two worlds coming together. Lucien stood at the center podium, commanding yet approachable in formal attire. When he saw Elena and his mother, his expression softened into something private and warm. Elena's heart fluttered. Their relationship had shifted in recent weeks. Countless late-night conversations about building the alliance, stolen moments in the library, the way his hand would find hers when no one was watching. Nothing had been spoken aloud, but everything had changed. Distinguished guests, Lucien began as silence fell. 6 weeks ago, this court faced a reckoning. We learned that our history was built on lies, that our isolation from humanity was engineered by those who profited from division. Today, we choose a different path. He gestured to Elena. Miss Elena Martinez, descended from the original architects of the Silent Oath. Please join me. Elena walked forward on shaking legs. The crowd watched. Vampires she'd learned to recognize, humans she'd briefed on what to expect, and representatives from vampire courts worldwide who'd come to witness this historic moment. The Silent Oath was more than a treaty, Lucien continued. It was a promise that different peoples could coexist, communicate, and cooperate. That understanding could bridge any divide. Today, we renew that promise. He turned to Elena, and when he signed, his movements were careful and deliberate. He'd been practicing. On behalf of the House of Voss and all vampire kind who stand with me, I offer you this covenant, that we will share our world with yours, that we will protect rather than prey upon humanity, and that we will build a future together based on truth, not fear. Elena's throat tightened with emotion. She signed back, knowing that both vampires and the human translators would understand. On behalf of humanity, I accept this covenant. We offer understanding for mystery, trust for suspicion, and partnership for isolation. Together, we begin again. The document, a new treaty written in both English and the symbolic language of the Silent Oath, was presented on a table between them. Elena and Lucien signed it simultaneously, witnessed by Queen Celine and the human delegates. Applause erupted, but Elena barely heard it. She was looking at Lucien, at the hope and vulnerability in his amber eyes. We did it, she whispered. You did it, he corrected quietly. I just followed where you led. The ceremony continued with speeches and presentations. Human linguists were introduced who would learn the Silent Oath, creating a new generation of liaisons. Vampire nobles pledged cooperation with human institutions. The gates of the Crimson Court were officially opened to public visitation. As evening fell and the crowds mingled, humans and vampires actually talking, laughing, beginning to know each other, Elena stood with Celine on a balcony overlooking it all. Your grandmother would be proud, Celine signed. She protected the truth for so long, waiting for the moment it could finally matter. I wish she could see this. Elena signed back, tears in her eyes. She can, Celine smiled. Through you. You're her legacy, Elena. Her courage, her compassion, her belief that people, any people, can change. Lucien appeared beside them, and Celine tactfully excused herself with a knowing look. Walk with me, he asked Elena. They descended to the gardens, now filled with both species exploring the grounds together. In a quiet corner near the rose arbor, Lucien finally stopped. I've been king for 200 years, he said quietly. I've made countless decisions, fought countless battles. But I've never been more terrified than I am right now. Why? Elena asked, though her heart already knew. Because in 6 weeks, you've become essential to me. To my mother, to this court, but mostly to me. He took her hand. And I don't know how to ask a human woman who's already sacrificed so much if she'd be willing to stay. Not as a servant, not as my mother's companion, but as what? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. As my partner. In all of this, he gestured to the castle, the people, the impossible new world they were building. As someone who challenges me, inspires me, and makes me believe we can be better than our history. Elena thought of her grandmother, who'd spent her life hiding. She thought of the prophecy, the line of words meeting the line of blood. She thought of how terrified she'd been just 6 weeks ago and how much had changed. I'm still just a girl from North Carolina, she said. I don't know how to be part of your world. Then we'll figure out together. Lucien's smile was soft. After all, we've already rewritten 300 years of history. How hard can the rest be? Elena laughed through tears.
Impossible. Absolutely impossible.
Good, he said, and kissed her as the first stars appeared overhead. I've always preferred impossible. Later, as they returned to the celebration, Celine caught Elena's eye and signed from across the courtyard. The night has a voice again. Elena signed back with a smile, and we taught each other to listen. Around them, humans and vampires mingled under lantern light, talking, learning, beginning the long work of understanding. The Crimson Court's gates stood open, welcoming rather than forbidding. And somewhere in the gardens, someone was teaching the silent oaths greeting to a group of fascinated students. May the night bring you peace. The words that had started everything, that had frozen a ballroom and shocked an entire kingdom, now passed freely between peoples who had been divided for centuries. Elena had come to New Orleans looking for rent money and found a destiny instead. She discovered that sometimes the smallest gestures, a kind word to someone lonely, a choice to trust instead of fear, could change entire worlds. The dawn was coming, but for the first time, no one was afraid of it. A new era had begun, one built on silence, blood, and understanding. And it was only just beginning.
The end.